I'm standing in my car in the Whole Foods parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon, staring at a bank notification on my phone that makes my stomach drop like I've missed a step going downstairs. $375,000. Gone. Not transferred. Not frozen. Deleted from an account that should have held everything we'd saved for the past 8 years. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold the phone, and I'm thinking about that woman, the homeless woman from 6 weeks ago, and how she looked at me when I handed her those two $20 bills and a container of leftover pad thai from dinner the night before. She grabbed my wrist. Actually grabbed it. "Baby," she said, and her eyes were so clear, so present, it was like looking straight through time. "Something's wrong where you work. Someone's stealing your future. Don't trust the quiet ones." And then she let go, and I drove away, thinking she was probably just mentally unwell, probably on something. Probably one of those people you help because it makes you feel good about yourself for exactly 45 seconds before you forget about them entirely. But I haven't forgotten, because she was right. Let me back up. 3 months ago, everything was exactly where I thought it should be. My name's Michael, I'm 38, and I worked maybe, as a senior analyst at Lexington Financial Group, this mid-sized wealth management firm in downtown Portland with about 90 employees and a reputation for being the stable choice. Not flashy, not crypto bros or high-risk ventures. Just the kind of place where people with 401ks and inheritance money come to make sure their kids' college funds don't evaporate. I'd been there for 6 years, worked my way up from junior analyst, and I was good at it. Really good. I had a salary of $145,000, a bonus structure that averaged another $35,000 a year, and I'd been consistently praised in my reviews by my boss, Richard Castellano. My wife, Jennifer, is a dental hygienist. She makes decent money, around $68,000, and we'd built a solid life in Lake Oswego, this quiet suburb about 20 minutes south of the city. We have a 4-bedroom house with a mortgage of $2,100 a month, paid off in about 17 years if we stick to the plan. We take one nice vacation a year, usually to the coast. We host Thanksgiving dinner, my side of the family, her side, usually about 20 people crammed into our dining room with Jennifer's mom, Linda, always bringing that green bean casserole nobody really wants, but everybody eats out of politeness. We have a 10-year-old daughter, Sophie, who's obsessed with soccer and has already decided she wants to be a veterinarian, which is the dream of roughly 70% of 10-year-old girls. But still, it's adorable. The house is nice, not mansion nice, but the kind of place you drive up to and think, yeah, that's a life somebody did right. Tan siding, dark shutters, a 2-car garage, a backyard with a trampoline that Sophie's outgrowing, but we keep anyway because she still bounces on it sometimes after school. We have a golden retriever named Max, who eats too much and sheds constantly, and who I absolutely love. We had dinner as a family most nights. We had date nights twice a month, usually dinner and a movie at that little indie theater downtown. I was on the HOA board. Terrible decision in retrospect. All those emails about sidewalk cracks and paint color violations. But it seemed like something a responsible homeowner should do. In other words, I had built the exact life that everyone in my income bracket is supposed to want. The life you see in those real estate websites and furniture catalogs. The life that feels like proof that you're doing adulthood correctly. And somewhere underneath all of it, I think I was bored. Not with Jennifer. Jennifer is sharp and funny, and she still makes me laugh during dinner, especially when she does her impression of Mrs. Patterson from the dental office, who always complains about her gums while eating hard candy. But with the sameness of it, the predictability, the sense that I'd hit my trajectory at Lexington, and that the next 30 years were just going to be variations on the same theme. Smaller bonuses some years, maybe a promotion to senior director if someone retired. Same house, same neighborhood, same conversations about property taxes, and Sophie's school fundraisers. That was my life 6 weeks ago. Before the woman. Before I understood that sometimes the universe sends you a message in the most unlikely packaging, and if you're lucky, you notice it before it's too late. I met her on a Tuesday. I'd taken an early lunch, because I had a doctor's appointment at 2 p.m. Nothing serious, just a physical. The kind of thing you do when you're trying to be responsible about your health. I grabbed some Thai food from this place 2 blocks from the office, Pad See, and I was eating it in the food court of the Pioneer Courthouse Square, sitting on one of those metal benches, when I noticed her. She was probably in her mid-50s, though homelessness has a way of aging people, so she might have been younger. She was wearing a long gray coat that had probably been nice once, and her hair was gray too, pulled back in a braid that was coming loose. She had a small backpack and a sleeping bag. She was looking at a family at another table, a mom, a dad, 2 kids, and there was something in her expression that made me think she was remembering what that felt like. I don't know why I did it. I'm not usually the type. I volunteer for my company's charitable giving committee, sure, which mostly means I attend one meeting a year and approve donations to the food bank, but I don't typically just hand money to people on the street. Jennifer always says I'm not cold about it, just careful. We have a daughter to think about, a mortgage, retirement planning. You can't help everyone. But I had leftover pad thai. And she looked tired. Hey, I said. Just like that. She looked up, and her eyes were, I remember this very specifically, the color of water. Gray-blue. Alert. Do you want this? I ordered too much. She stood up and came over, and I realized she was taller than I'd thought, with good posture. She took the container and opened it, smelled it, and smiled like I'd just handed her something precious. Thank you, sweetheart, she said. She had an accent I couldn't place. Maybe East Coast originally. That's kind. I gave her a 20, and then another 20, because she was eating the noodles and looking at me like she was trying to read something written on my forehead. The second 20 was impulsive. Jennifer would have told me it was stupid, that I was being taken advantage of, but something about this woman made me want to help. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just a Tuesday, and I felt generous. She finished chewing and swallowed, and then she reached over and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was strong, steadier than I would have expected. Baby, she said, and there was no slur in her voice, no sign of drugs or mental illness, just clarity. Something's wrong where you work. Someone's stealing your future. Don't trust the quiet ones. I pulled my hand back, a little startled. What? No, everything's fine. Work is fine. Maybe now, she said, but something's coming. You'll know it when you see it. When you do, you go to the police. You don't wait. You don't try to handle it. You go straight to the police. You promise me? I promised. Of course I promised. What else would you do? But I thought she was crazy. That was my mistake. I didn't think about her again. Not really. I pushed it into that mental folder where you keep the weird interactions that don't make sense. The stuff you dismiss because admitting it matters. Feels like admitting you're the kind of person who believes in signs. I'm not that guy. I'm a data analyst. I deal in spreadsheets and probability. A homeless woman with a cryptic warning at the courthouse square doesn't fit into my worldview, and I had more immediate things to worry about. Like the fact that Richard Castellano had been acting strange. It started small. 3 weeks after I'd met the woman, Richard called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. Richard's been at Lexington for 12 years. He's the kind of boss who remembers your birthday and asks about Sophie's soccer games. We'd always had a good relationship, professional but warm. He's maybe 55, divorced, lives downtown in a condo with his second wife, Miranda, who works in marketing. Michael, he said, and he didn't look at me when I sat down. He was staring at his computer screen. I need you to pull some files from the Castellano family trust account, specifically the quarterly statements from 2022 and 2023. And I need you to do it quietly. Don't mention it to anyone in the department. My stomach tightened. Not dramatically. Just a little knot. The kind you get when something doesn't add up. Sure, I said. Is everything okay with the account? Everything's fine, he said quickly. Too quickly. I just need to cross-reference some things for a personal matter. It's nothing work-related. But he wouldn't look at me. And Richard always looked at you when he talked. I pulled the files. That was my first mistake. Not the pulling, but the not asking more questions. The trust was substantial. Richard's father had passed away in 1998, and the inheritance had been professionally managed through our firm. The account held roughly $2.1 million. When I looked at the statements, I didn't see anything unusual. Quarterly distributions were regular. Investments were diversified. Everything looked exactly as it should. I sent him the files via email, flagged them as confidential, and tried not to think about why a senior partner would need his own trust statements quietly. 2 weeks after that, I started noticing things. Small things at first. In early October, I was pulling together a client portfolio review when I noticed that one of our major accounts, a corporate pension fund managed by Lexington, had made a transfer I didn't have authorization records for. $250,000 moved from the active portfolio to something labeled Administrative Reserve. The signature on the authorization was Gerald Hammond's, our CFO. Gerald's been here even longer than Richard, maybe 16 years. He's meticulous, everything by the book. Except this didn't look by the book. I checked the Administrative Reserve account. It wasn't one I'd ever seen before. There was no documentation of what it was for. I dug into the system and found that it had been created 3 months earlier, June, and it already held just over $800,000, all transferred from different client accounts. Different fund sources, different authorization signatures, all of them supposedly legitimate partners. My hands felt cold when I closed the laptop. I didn't call Richard. I didn't call Gerald. Instead, I did something stupid. I went to the person I thought I could trust, David Chen, the operations manager. David and I had worked together since I started at Lexington. We grab lunch sometimes. I know his kids' names. I thought if something weird was happening, he'd want to know. I asked him to coffee on a Friday morning before work. "Hey," I said, when we were sitting in the corner booth at this little place called Brew and Bean, "I need to ask you something off the record. Have you heard anything about an administrative reserve account in our system?" David's face went completely still. And I mean completely still, like someone had paused him mid-sip of coffee. When he set the cup down, his hand was shaking. "Michael," he said quietly, "where did you hear about that?" "I was working on a portfolio review and stumbled across some transfers. I'm probably just confused about the accounting. It's probably nothing." "It's not nothing," he said. He looked around, checking if anyone was listening. "Look, you need to forget you saw that. I'm serious. Forget it, don't ask questions, and don't tell anyone you asked me about it." "David, I mean it." His voice was hard in a way I'd never heard before. "Michael, I like you. You seem like a good guy, but you don't want to know about this. Trust me." He left $20 on the table and walked out, leaving his coffee half finished. That's when the fear really started. That's when I thought about the woman at the courthouse square. When I thought about her clear eyes and her voice saying, "Don't trust the quiet ones." I spent that entire weekend sitting in my basement, pulling files on my personal laptop, trying to trace where the money was going. Jennifer came downstairs around 11 on Saturday night. "You've been down here for 4 hours, she said. "What are you doing?" "Just work stuff," I said, which was technically true, but also a complete lie. "You look terrible. You're pale." "I'm fine, just trying to get ahead on some accounts." She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. She kissed the top of my head and went back upstairs. I heard her on the phone with her mom, Linda. Something about whether they should have turkey or prime rib for Thanksgiving. Normal life. The world continuing while I sat in the dark with my laptop, pulling at a thread that I was increasingly sure would unravel everything. By Monday morning, I'd mapped the pattern. Over the past 6 months, approximately $2.3 million had been moved from various client accounts into the administrative reserve, which was then being transferred out in smaller chunks to an account registered to something called Castellano Development, LLC, a company I'd never heard of. A company that didn't appear to have any legitimate business purpose. Richard was stealing. Not small amounts, Not a mistake or a gray area situation. $2.3 million, slowly siphoned from clients who trusted Lexington Financial Group to protect their money, and he was using Gerald to do it. I sat at my desk on Monday morning, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. My coffee tasted like metal. Sophie had asked me before school if I was okay, and I'd said yes, and she'd looked at me with that specific kind of disappointment that children have when they know you're lying, but they're too young to call you on it. I thought about the woman's warning. Don't trust the quiet ones. Richard Castellano was many things, but he was quiet about this. He'd stolen from his clients, from people who'd trusted him with their children's college funds and their retirement accounts, and he'd done it quietly, methodically, with help from people like Gerald and apparently others I hadn't identified yet. And now I knew. And knowing meant I had to do something. The problem was, I had no idea what. I called the FBI on a Tuesday morning, the same day of the week I'd met the woman at the courthouse square. I'm not sure if that was intentional or just the way time works when your life is coming apart. The Portland field office is in a building downtown that looks like it was designed in the 1970s, and nobody's bothered to update it. I sat in a plastic chair in the waiting area, my leg bouncing, my palms sweating, with a folder containing printed statements and account transfers that proved Richard Castellano had stolen $2.3 million from people who trusted him. An agent named Sarah Voss came out, mid-50s, sharp eyes, the kind of person who looked like she'd heard every excuse and fabrication a human could manufacture. She took me back to an interview room that smelled like old coffee and stale air, and I laid it all out. Every transfer, every account, every discrepancy. I documented it all on my personal laptop, everything dated and sourced. Voss took notes. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Why are you telling us this instead of going to your boss?" she asked. "Because my boss is the one stealing the money," I said. And the CFO is helping him. And I don't know who else is involved. I don't know if it goes higher up. I don't know anything except that it's happening and it needs to stop. Voss nodded slowly. "You understand that by coming forward, you're potentially putting yourself in a difficult position at your workplace." "I understand," I said. "I also understand that people's retirement money is disappearing. People like David Chen, who I work with, who has kids. People I don't know. People who saved their entire lives." "Okay," Voss said. "Here's what happens next." What happened next was a federal investigation. What happened next was me going back to work on Wednesday morning, acting like nothing had changed, while the FBI quietly began the process of obtaining subpoenas and warrants and access to Lexington Financial's systems. I didn't tell Jennifer, not yet. I knew that the moment I told her, she'd want to know what it meant for us, for our house, for Sophie's college fund, which was thankfully separate from my work accounts. I knew she'd be scared. I was scared, so I kept it contained. I came home, I ate dinner, I helped Sophie with her homework. I went to bed next to my wife and stared at the ceiling for hours. On Friday, 3 days after I'd met with the FBI, Richard called an all-hands meeting. Everyone gathered in the conference room on the 5th floor. 90 employees, give or take. Richard stood at the front with Gerald Hammond beside him, and Richard's face was pale in a way I'd never seen before. He looked like a man who'd just gotten news that the building was on fire. "We've become aware," he said slowly, "of some irregularities in our accounting practices. We're cooperating fully with federal investigators. Effective immediately, we're suspending operations while a full audit is conducted." The room exploded. People were shouting questions. Someone was crying. Gerald looked like he might vomit. I watched Richard. I watched him look around the room until his eyes landed on me. And in that moment, he knew. His face went from pale to gray. He knew it was me. After the meeting, I didn't wait for the confrontation. I packed up my desk, the photo of Jennifer and Sophie, the little wooden sign that said Senior Analyst, the coffee mug I'd had since my second year there, and I left. I walked out of the building at 3 in the afternoon on a Friday, and I didn't look back. That's when everything accelerated. By Monday morning, the news was everywhere. Major fraud at Portland financial firm. 2.3 million stolen from client accounts. FBI arrests senior partners. Richard was arrested at his house on Sunday night. Gerald was arrested at his office on Monday morning. By the end of the week, 2 other employees had been charged as accessories. People I'd worked with for years. People whose names I knew and whose faces I'd seen in the cafeteria. My name wasn't mentioned. The FBI had kept me confidential. But people at Lexington knew. They had to know. The calls started coming in. Other employees asking if I'd reported it, asking why I hadn't said anything, asking how long I'd known. One of them, a guy named Marcus who worked in wealth management, called me at home. "You destroyed our firm," he said. He was crying. "I just got news that my position is being eliminated. My kids' school tuition is due in 3 weeks." "I'm sorry," I said, "but Richard was stealing from clients, from people like you." "I didn't care about the clients. I cared about having a job." He hung up. There were more calls like that. There were also emails, some thanking me, from clients who'd been affected and were grateful to have the theft discovered before more money disappeared. But mostly there was silence, the kind of professional exile that happens when you're the person who told the truth. Jennifer sat me down on Tuesday night after Sophie was in bed. "What happens to us?" she asked. "To our house? To everything?" "The house is fine," I said. "My 401k is fine. Everything I had saved separately is fine. I didn't put money into any of the compromised accounts. I was careful about that. But your job is gone." "My job is gone," I agreed. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm proud of you. I also think you're an idiot, but I'm proud of you." I laughed, and it was the first time in a week that anything felt real. The trial took 14 months. Richard hired an expensive lawyer. Gerald tried to claim he'd been pressured into the scheme. Both of them were found guilty. Richard was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Gerald got 6, plus restitution. The clients whose money had been stolen began the process of recovery. Most of them would get back maybe 70 cents on the dollar if they were lucky. I spent those 14 months looking for work. It wasn't easy. The financial industry is small. Everyone knew what I'd done. Some firms saw me as a whistleblower, which was good. Some saw me as a guy who'd ratted out his boss, which was bad, depending on which side of the moral fence you stood. I eventually found a position at a smaller firm in Seattle, about 3 hours north. Smaller paycheck, $120,000 instead of $145,000, but stable, honest, a place where nobody was stealing. We didn't sell the house. Jennifer didn't want to. "This is our home," she said, and she was right. We tightened our belts. We stopped the twice-monthly date nights. We cut back on vacation. We were fine. On the day I was supposed to start my new job, I went back to the courthouse square. I don't know why. I hadn't seen the woman again, not since that Tuesday 2 years earlier. I sat on one of the metal benches in the same spot where I'd eaten pad thai, and I looked around at the people, tourists, homeless folks, people on lunch breaks, people just passing through. I never found her. I don't know if she was even real or if she was just someone my brain invented to make sense of what I already suspected. I've never been able to answer that question, and I'm not sure it matters. What matters is that I listened. What matters is that when someone, even a stranger, even someone broken by circumstances I'll never understand, tells you that something is wrong, sometimes you should believe them. I took the job in Seattle. Sophie's still in soccer. Jennifer's still a dental hygienist. Max is still eating too much and shedding all over our furniture. We're not rich. We're not particularly special. But we're honest, and we sleep okay at night. And that's more than a lot of people have. And every Tuesday when I see a homeless person, I stop. I give them money. I listen if they want to talk. Because sometimes the universe sends you a message, and if you're smart, you notice it before it's too late. That woman was right about one thing for sure. Something was wrong where I worked, and someone was stealing my future. But I didn't let them take it. I didn't trust the quiet ones. And that made all the difference.